So last time we looked at a general geological profile of Skyrim and tried to connect it with the rest of Tamriel, but I still can't stop thinking about these ores. There's a handful of them which are very obviously from the real world, but most of them not so obvious. To make matters worse, the way smelting works in Skyrim and ESO tells us that every ingot is a pure metal, which means you can smelt an ore with nothing else to create a metal bar of the same name. Despite this, I'm really interested in trying to pinpoint the real-life equivalents, but I'm gonna have a few rules here. First, I'm gonna do ores only. Not only because metallurgy just doesn't make sense in these games, but when we get to the more mythological equipment, I don't want to just say because magic all the time. I'm also going to be equipment focused, which, along the same lines, I'm going to ignore ingots if the equipment makes more sense. Third, I want to go by the real-life property, not the real-life name. I will talk about both, but the focus is going to be making these ores feel as connected as possible to real-life minerals. Don't forget to challenge and comment, and let's roll that theme song. Elder Scrolls minerals can be categorized in 4 ways: real-life ores, Skyrimized ores, special ores, and ESO. Iron, silver, and gold are exactly what they are in real life, no need to talk about them. But then we get to the others. I'm going to tell you right now, most of these have real-life equivalents in name, but 0 equivalents in reality. If we were to do it by real-life name, well, that'd be easy. In real life, ebony is an African wood used in piano keys. A hardwood, but not that hard. Moonstone is a type of feldspar stone, often used in jewelry. Quicksilver is a name for liquid mercury. Corundum is a crystalline gemstone of aluminum oxide, used to make aluminum. Malachite is a type of copper ore, but brittle and more often sought in its crystalline form. It's probably most similar to the real-life name than any on this list. Volcanic glass, like those mined in Morrowind's Red Mountain and used for glass armor, is probably a form of malachite. Orichalcum is a sort of lost metal, one talked about in the real ancient world. More than likely was a type of bronze alloy, but not an ore. Most of the Elder Scrolls Online ores are either used in Skyrim, exactly what they are in real life, or completely fictional in name and use. If you're interested, these are the real life ores, and these are the fictional beyond belief ores. I feel like I keep shorthanding ESO, but nothing's really going to be useful to us here, besides maybe some references the artist used. This is in no small part due to many minerals being used for style or magic stats, not for strength. With this in mind, I'm throwing lead and mercury from Daggerfall in the bin with them, as well as Skyrim's new Madness ore. Sorry, it's just complete fantasy. So this video is going to be talking about these 2 categories for the most part. Ready to go? Yeah! Starting with ebony, I'm not going with the wood on this one. I'm linking it to tungsten. Tungsten is a heavy, tough metal that can take a lot of heat. If you're a welder, you know what tungsten is. It's used in a lot of modern weapons, and in real life, it's the strongest pure metal. Remember, a pure metal is just something that's not alloyed with a bunch of other things. Iron, copper, silver, all those are pure metals because you can have an iron, copper, and silver bar just out of that. Coincidentally, in-game, ebony can be forged and crafted from the ore alone, if you don't count the leather strips. No refining ore needed. Yeah, ebony can be linked as a quick cooling igneous rock similar to obsidian, but even though obsidian can make great decoration and the Mayans use them as arrow tips, armor made from obsidian would actually be a lot more brittle than you think, so I'm team tungsten all the way. Moonstone is interesting because it's a thing in real life, but in game it's specifically used for its magical properties. Take the magic away and you have a pretty plausible moonstone, like how it's used in real life to a very basic degree. But let's be clear, it's a magic mineral in the Elder Scrolls. In-game books specifically mention it as the magical catalyst that gives glass and elven armor their strength. I'm trying to be generous here, but you're gonna have to close your eyes on this one. Quicksilver, not Quicksilver. I'm going magnesium here. You could argue that the game's Moonstone magic makes pairing with real-life Quicksilver this magical combination, but remember, Quicksilver in real life is liquid mercury. It has a low reactive point that would turn it to a gas were you to put it in a smelter. So an ingot of it is kind of a joke. What it could be in this fantasy world is an off-brand metal, a not quite silver metal, something you'd have around the blacksmith that you could use in a pinch quickly. I don't want to stretch here, but it is used with other metals pretty often to create something pretty strong, like magnesium. Magnesium is an alloy creating wonder in real life, which immediately checks out with Skyrim's Quicksilver being used as a secondary metal in so much equipment. Speaking of secondary metals, let's go to corundum. I'm going with manganese, but let me explain a little bit. In-game, corundum is used with iron to make steel, but in real life, it's a rock. One of the highest on the hardness scale, which means melting it in those little smelters is not going to happen. The only thing harder to melt would be diamond, and nobody's making armor out of that. Oh, right. Steel is made from types of iron mixed with types of carbon at very high temperatures. In the old days, they'd use all kinds of things to get that carbon, but corundum? No. In real life, corundum is considered alumina, which is used to make aluminum, which can help make and harden steel, but this process wasn't really a thing until the industrial age, and never on its own like a pure metal. A metal that can get us closer, though, is manganese, an element that can mix with carbon and oxygen to make the mineral of the same name. It hadn't really been used in steel production until modern times, and it's not as heavily used as iron is in the alloy, but even the U.S. Geological Survey insists that manganese is just as important as iron is to the steelmaking process. It's a mineral that can toughen alloys and increase the usability of low-carbon steel. It's almost too perfect as our missing ingredient, and it's far from the hardness of real-life corundum. Given that it's also used for some other armors, I'm pretty convinced. So corundum isn't a terrible name for this Skyrim mineral, but I will clarify that it would just make more sense to use more coal in steelmaking given the size of smelters in the Elder Scrolls. I mean, given the color, I wouldn't be opposed to calling copper somewhat a real-life equivalent of Skyrim's corundum, and copper can help in real-life steelmaking, but it's kind of already used in jewelry, and we're kind of getting into stretch territory here. Maybe corundum in the Elder Scrolls just contains small enough traces of manganese that you would have to use a whole chunk. My speculation ends here. Moving on to malachite, which is closest to malachite. It's the second, alongside moonstone, whose bar is not an ingot and just called refined malachite. In game, it's what's used to make glass equipment and used to temper glass, but it needs moonstone along with it. Malachite's interesting to me as a Morrowind player because in the game, we've had those glass rocks that you could harvest glass from. Malachite and all these harvestable ores didn't exist in those games yet, so I don't know, maybe in lore they've evolved their thinking, and in the 4th era they're calling glass more appropriate name malachite. That's gonna be my headcanon. So IRL malachite isn't going to be strong enough to make this glass armor on its own, but kind of like Quicksilver, pairing it with this magical moonstone is enough to make me want to give it a pass. Everything else about Skyrim's malachite checks out to its real-world name, so it's a decent counterpart. Just don't go trying to make glass armor out of it. Orichalcum. Yeah. So I'm gonna say copper here, but I'm giving it a huge asterisk. That thing we talked about in the beginning about Skyrim ingots being uncomfortably pure metal versions of the ores, that's really, really important here. In-game, orichalcum makes orc armor. Orichalcum as a metal does exist in real life in the ancient world. It was likely a zinc-copper alloy, but records also have the metal ranging between gold and copper, tin and copper, sometimes brass. We don't have time to be getting archaeological here, but the name orichalcum has roots. Oros and chalcos literally mean mountain copper. Fitting for the orcs. The suffix is just usually ascribed to a metal. So the metal itself, I actually like its real-life name being used. If not this ancient orichalcum, I would ascribe gunmetal or copper beryllium to it, but the ore itself, with that green color, copper feels in reach. Maybe the orcs have a special smelting method that oxidizes the metal quickly to give it that green color. So those are our main Skyrim metals. I'll quickly touch on mithril, adamantium, and lodestone, and stalrim, since those were featured in older games to some degree. So mithril as an ore is described in Daggerfall's King Edward books, actually. Allegedly it appeared in Hammerfell's Fang Lair. Tolkien actually invented mithril as being this metal that was stronger and lighter than steel, but I don't know. Maybe this mithril from King Edward became known as Skyrim's Quicksilver? Just like how malachite and orichalcum didn't really exist in name until Skyrim yet, maybe mithril armor was made by mixing quicksilver and steel somehow. Not gonna question this too much, just gonna tentatively attach Skyrim's Quicksilver to it. Also not going to question adamantium too much, even though it's basically diamond. I can't deny that adamantium tower exists, but the metal adamant is mythological. Supposedly the hardest metal ever, supposedly from diamond. The word diamond in the English language also literally comes from the Old French diamant, coming from Greek adamos, the word for unconquerable. This all translated into Marvel Comics inventing a metal they called adamantium, and Minecraft giving us diamond armor. But there is some truth to all this. What is now called adamantine spar in real life is just a very hard corundum, which has the same luster as real diamonds. Probably couldn't smelt it though. Not to be confused with the organic compound adamantane, which has the same atomic arrangement as also diamond. We have a lot of crazy made-up ores like those in ESO, but really don't want to get too much into theory territory here. But one I will quickly mention that ESO players may be familiar with is lodestone. It's actually a real-life mineral and featured in Daggerfall as an alchemical ingredient. The only reason why I'm mentioning it is because ESO took lodestone to this magical level that can kind of help explain all the teleporting going on. It's been used in fantasy a lot, likely due to its intense magnetic properties. I got one more bonus for you with Stalrum. Yeah, it's really just a magical glacial ice in name, but I'll put Ice 9 and Pykrete as possible comparisons. No, not that Ice 9, just an ultra-stable laboratory-created form of solid water. Pykrete is a mixture of water and sawdust used to reinforce modern ice domes. The speculation territory we can get into for these fantasy ores is almost infinite. So I want to hear from you. What would a perfect blacksmithing system in a game be, and how close did Skyrim get? I also want to hear from the geology experts out there who can fill in what I might have missed. I had some help for this video, but I'm still not a professional, so I'd love to hear more. Stay curious, and see you next time.
There is much to learn. Var, var, var.